Hi everybody, Adam Steele here from Hot Pole Studios, and today we are looking at the Line 6 HX Stomp. These have been out for a little while now. They've been updated so the firmware is 3.1, and I am going to be digging into using this for bass, looking at the different amp models, what you might want to actually do as a practical bass player that isn't just weird and wacky effects, and how one of these could be the one-stop solution to getting several different really useful and usable bass sounds to go and do metal shows, rock shows, something that's a lot more down-tempo or funky, and keep one rig to do all of this, keep it simple, and do it all on a fairly reasonable budget. Hello everybody. So this is being done from my home setup with a bit of a weird camera angle. Firstly, so you can see the bass, and secondly, because I'm kind of locked down at home with the C word at the moment, so I can't film this at the studio. So yes, this is being done from home, and you can see the HX Stomp is on the desk here, and it's all set up ready to go. And you can hear it through a strange setup that I've done, but I'm using the USB on the HX Stomp, which is really useful. Let's say for a minute that you're a bass player, because that's what this video's based around, but also a guitarist. This turns out to be a really useful unit to record with, because I don't need to go out into a separate interface if I don't want to. I don't need to do anything particularly complicated with routing, and I can do things like I can record a completely clean DI track and record the bass tone and get live monitoring from the unit with zero latency all at once, which makes it a really good recording kind of tool. So behind this HX edit here, you can see a copy of a Reaper running. I'm just going to save this project. If I start to hit record here, you're going to see 3 stereo tracks, which is a little bit of overkill, but if I go... These don't have to be stereo, but the fact that I can record them in stereo means if I've got any stereo effects going on, then I can record them. So if I solo this is the main sound that you've been hearing. This is a completely separate sound that is in between the amp and the cab. So if you wanted to do separate cab modeling later, but you like the tone of your amp and your effects up to that point, you can do that. And that's using input 3 and 4 off the USB. Input 5 and 6 off the USB are completely clean DIs. I've only got something plugged in the left right now, which of course is the bass, but it doubles it on left and right, unless you plug an extra plug in to the right hand side, in which case you get 2 separate signals. And then if I wanted to go even further crazy, there are, on the side of the HX Stomp, left and right returns, which can either be used as effects returns or aux inputs, which can record in on their own separate stereo pair. Or if you're DAW, you want to choose mono for each track, you can do that, save on file size, all that kind of stuff. So if I was running just a mono bass setup, I could just go input mono, input 1. And then that means I don't need to double everything up in stereo, because what's the point? In this case, I am using a little bit of stereo stuff, which I'm going to talk about on this patch that I have made, because this is really kind of an all-encompassing patch. This is my kind of Geddy Lee sound, Rush sound, which is why it's quite distorted when I dig in. And if I go to a second snapshot, you'll hear this gets even more. So that's got more drive, that's got a stereo chorus going on, but that's without changing the patch, changing the preset at all. Now, interestingly, the compressor seems to be off in the second snapshot, so I'm going to turn that on, and that should now be saved in that snapshot. Cool. Right. So what I'm going to do is talk you through how I've made this patch. So let's start from the very start. There is a distortion pedal in here, and they've called that the 0 amp bass DI, which is what I consider to be their version of the Sans amp pedal, which is one of my favorite bass sounds, even on its own. If I turn off everything else just for a second, this is the completely clean bass. Classic jazz bass sound. Turn on the Sans amp and suddenly I'll get a bit of drive. There we go. Slightly out, but we good. And so this, it's a little lower in level than the original sound, but I do tend to hit quite hard. And so, but what I can do is I can play more gently. And I get a tiny little bit of grit on the top end, but it's nothing overbearing. And so that's one of my favorite things to do. The amp, let's turn on the amp and cab together. The amp is the good old Ampeg SVT on the normal channel, which fingerstyle sounds like this. And that's going into the Ampeg 8x10 cabinet. I've got this in dual mode right now, so it's this, but it's the exact same cab on both sides. Why would I do that? It's a bit weird. Well, I've got a stereo effect in between the amp and the cab here, which I'll come back to in a minute. But by using dual mode, that means that any stereo effects come through in stereo and pass through as they should. I've used the 421 Dynamics. It's a nice bright mic, not super close to the amp because it's quite a low-end heavy cabinet anyway. I don't need the microphone to be super close because if I had too much low end, that means that all the rest of the detail of the tone kind of gets drowned out by just the low end. There's a little early reflections in there, but yeah, the amp. On snapshot 1, I've got the drive relatively low. The mids and treble are kind of pushed, but then the cabinet is quite bass heavy, so between them, I mean, if I just pick for a little bit without being too aggressive. Nice, solid bass tone. Now, if I had the Sans amp on top of that, that just gives me, especially when I dig in, that little bit of drive. And of course, to finish the general tone off, I have a compressor, which is the LA Studio compressor, based on the LA2A, of course, the old classic studio valve opto compressor, which just gives a nice, big, thick, and even kind of sound. Now, these settings look quite high with the peak reduction there, but I'm not hitting it with a particularly high output amp tone here, which means that there's plenty of scope to have the levels kind of smoothed out without it being overly compressed, because compression in a bass tone is great. It's one of my favorite things, but overly compressed bass tones can be problematic because then they kind of lose all the character and definition. And we don't want that. At least I don't want that. So when we get to the next bit, of course, this send here is just sending out of output 3 and 4 in between the amp and the cab. So that, like I said earlier, if I decide I want to record this without the cab on and then choose a cab later, that gives me that option. And it also means that I can then do some clever reamping if I so desire. But also that means that I have the choice of the drive-through and hearing the Line 6 cab in real time, so I can hear what it's kind of supposed to sound like, and then later I still have the option to mix tweak. Now, before we look at any different tones, let's look at some of the controls that we have on the HX Stomp. On the drive, on the amp, I've actually got an automation on the front of the HX Stomp here where it doesn't turn anything on and off, it changes a value. So it's giving the drive a kick. So if we look at the amp ASVT normal here, it's got drive, it's got a little icon next to it, and that is Footswitch 2. If I right click on that, I've chosen Footswitch 2. Now if I go to controller assign, yeah, Footswitch 2, Ampeg normal, yeah, SVT drive, and what I've got is a latching, which means when I press it, it changes, and then I press it, it changes back, rather than momentary where it only happens where I hold it down, which can be useful if you've got like a tiny little solo spot in a song you don't want to be tap dancing super quick. You can just hold it down and do a little gain boost maybe while you lean on the pedal. That could be quite useful. And so I've got minimum drive 3.2, maximum drive is 7.5, which is a lot. But what that means is in the middle of a song, if I just touch this with my foot, that's now bumped the drive even higher than that second snapshot. So now I've got... So that can really pop me to the front of a mix just for a few seconds if that's what I want, or if we've got a really heavy section of a song. And of course, because at the end of this I have this compressor stopping everything from getting wildly loud, that just means it sounds more aggressive, sounds a little more forward, doesn't get overly compressed on the way out, but does kind of keep the levels in check. And so that means that I've now got that assigned to a button without having to add a distortion pedal or a boost pedal or take up another block, because the HX Stomp does have kind of limited numbers of blocks here. Now there's one here that I'm not using, I can always play around with. There's one that is wah. I can get an expression pedal, plug it into this top jack here and do the wah thing. Let's just see if I have an expression pedal around. There we go. So I've got an expression pedal on the floor now that's plugged into expression 1 and on the Veta wah. That's, if we right click on it, the expression pedal 1 is connected. So when I do this, I've also put the drive on so you can actually hear what it's doing. But if I use my foot and do the classic wah motion, now the low seems a little bit not high enough, and of course I've got the mix on this less than 100%, which for bass means that some of the low end gets through, so it doesn't just choke all the low end out when I'm playing this. But so yeah, I could have on my board an expression pedal like I've got a cheap one right now, but that means that was dead easy to do. I could just have that as an extra option, and suddenly I've got a bass wah with a drive, which is awesome. I've also got the bass DI here, the Sansamp model, on a switch on my assignments. So I've got controller assigned Footswitch 3, or is it, sorry, Footswitch 1. Yeah, Footswitch 1, because it goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 are currently not connected, but they would go in where the expression pedal is, but it gives you an option. I could put a dual foot switch option in there for extra control, but I don't really need it for the patch that I'm doing. But that's my usual tone. Very nice, the fact that I can have each one set so that whatever I need to do, let's just save this preset again. Save, there we go. And there is space for one more. This is where we start to get a little close in terms of processing power that the HX Stomp can do, but this is already a pretty powerful preset. I don't know if I need another distortion. I quite often have a bass compressor right near the start. Let's see. Oh, deluxe comp. That might be what I want. So I would use 4:1, not have the threshold quite so low, attack probably 30 milliseconds just to let the initial click through, release really fast, and then let's have a look, see where this gets us. And without. Yeah, that's to me like something like an 1176 style compressor, which is one of my favorite compressors. And so that's not doing much. I do wish that I had kind of a meter here, but that's one of the compromises, I guess, in the design. But I can hear that it's doing something, but not a lot. And that's really important to me on a bass patch. So there you go. This is even just a tiny fraction of what the HX Stomp is capable of, and in upcoming videos hopefully I'll be showing you more of it, using it more in videos. That was just using the Ampeg SVT normal as well. There are loads of different bass amp options here. I've got my crazy stereo chorus going on here, so I can go. And because I can have 3 snapshots, instead of the 3 pedals being individual, turning on this drive or that wah or that element, if I want to have snapshots instead, without having that little gap in between the preset change, I could have, say, this, which is my cleaner tone, this one, which is my standing out from the crowd kind of tone, which has more drive on it there, and it's got the modulation on. And snapshot 3, let's just go absolutely nutso with the drive on this and have that really high. And also let's have the mids, right click on that and go snapshots, treble snapshots. There we go. Now they're enabled for snapshots, which means I can make these even more gritty on this particular snapshot and make sure the compressor's on, and a little more gain on this, so I really jump out the speakers now. So snapshot 2 and then snapshot 1. So snapshot 1, I'm digging in pretty hard, but on that snapshot I can go and really do kind of a full set with that if I want. Snapshot 2 is my show-off tone. And snapshot 3 is all the gain. But it's just turned on and off the relevant things at the relevant times. So I'm going to go back to snapshot 1 and just save this, because what I could do is change the controller assignments so that if I just clear all assignments and then add in, so if I change the pedals, there we go, it seems here that Footswitch 1 and 2 are pretty much dedicated to assignment, but Footswitch 3 can be changed to snapshot up. So with 3 snapshots on this button, I can now go. Now I would have to now go in and reassign things because I turned them off because I'm stupid, but Snapshot's really useful for not even having to change presets, so in a single song I can just bump stuff up and down without having to change everything. But yeah, there you go. There's so much more we can do with bass with the HX Stomp, but being able to record into the computer or go straight out the interface right there, straight out of the HX Stomp, saving all this on the pedal so we can take it out on tour, but also being able to change all this on the fly on the HX Edit. There's so much to go at, so I hope you found this useful. Back to me. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this useful, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got loads more production stuff. There's bass stuff coming. We've got more tutorials on how to use Reaper and much, much more. Join the Discord if you want to get involved in conversations, ask me questions, ask our community questions, and subscribe, of course. I think I already said that, but yes. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Hey everyone, that might be the end of the video, but if you fancy carrying on this conversation, we have a Discord server, link is in the description. We're also on Patreon, which is something you can really help us with. We also are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hop Hole Studios. See you there.